Welcome in, everybody, to the fourth episode of the Free Play Podcast. I am the host, Eli Scales, and today we're going to be covering a little bit about the World Series between the Dodgers and the Blue Jays. It happened about 2 weeks ago now, but we never got around to recapping it. Things popped up. I was sick a little bit in between there, so we're going to be covering that today. We're going to be talking about two of the most important and pivotal games in the series, and being Game 3 and Game 7, and we're going to talk about how the implications of this World Series could be felt on the history of MLB forever. So first off, we're going to talk about Game 3. Game 3 was won by the Dodgers 6-5 in 18 innings off of a Freddie Freeman solo walk-off home run, which is just one of the most insane ways a playoff game can possibly end. The real turning point in this series was Game 3. In the World Series, when the series is tied to 1-1, the Game 3 winner goes on to win the series 68 out of 99 times, which is about 69% of the time. So this game was really important into the Dodgers winning the World Series because they were able to take a 2-1 lead in the series and regain control from the Jays. It looked like at the end of the series that this may not end up mattering, and this would be one of the times where the Game 3 winner did not win the series, but they come back in the Game 7 and they do end up winning the World Series. But in this Game 3, the top of the 7th, Bo Bichette hit an RBI single to pull ahead for the Jays 5-4 with 2 outs in the inning. And John Schneider, the Blue Jays manager, who is one of the best managers in the MLB, in my opinion, makes an insane move that I don't think you can make in this position. He pulls Bo Bichette out of the game for Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, which you may think, well, why would he do that? Well, Bo Bichette was coming off of a knee injury that had sidelined him for the end of the regular season and the beginning part of the postseason, and really limited his ability to contribute defensively, pushing him over to second base instead of shortstop, while Jimenez, the early season second baseman, moved over to shortstop in the playoffs. And it also limited his ability to run the bases. So they go ahead and put Kiner-Falefa in here, and little do they know, the game would go on to go 11 more innings, and IKF would come up to the plate 4 times and not record a hit. Bichette likely would have had at least 1 hit in those 4 appearances, as Bichette is one of the best hitters in the MLB and was on a tear in the playoffs. So, as I said, we know Bo Bichette was dealing with a knee injury, but you can't take a player as good as Bichette out of the game on the fringe chance that he gets the opportunity to score with 2 outs, especially coming off a runner at first base. It's just not a safe gamble to make if you're John Schneider, and you would assume that he would learn from this mistake, and later in the series it comes to bite him again. But the real hero in this game for the Dodgers was Will Klein. A lot of people here in Kansas know about Will Klein. He came up through the Royals organization, was a Royals draft pick, and he ended up being traded from the Kansas City Royals to the Oakland A's at the time as a part of the Lucas Erceg trade. He was then DFA'd in the offseason by Oakland, and Oakland trades him to Seattle. For those of you who do not know what a DFA is, DFA stands for Designated for Assignment. So he went through waivers. Nobody wanted to pick him up. He reverted back to the A's, and they ended up trading him to Seattle for international bonus pool money to sign unknown 16-year-olds from Latin America. So Will Klein was really not highly regarded at all for the Mariners, and he was simply exchanged for just some money to sign unknown players who had never even been to the United States before. And the Mariners end up DFAing him. He goes through the same process, similar to what he did with the Oakland, and he ends up getting traded to the Dodgers. He pitches very few innings for them, and he threw most of the time this season in AAA, but he finds his way onto the postseason roster because of Alex Vesia having to go away due to some family problems, and he ends up getting called on with nobody left in the bullpen, essentially. It was just starters available, which Dave Roberts, the Dodgers manager, would not want to go to because he didn't want to sabotage the upcoming starts for them in the playoffs. So he gets called upon in the 15th inning, and he pitches 4 shutout 1-hit innings, and he puts the Dodgers pitching staff on his back and gets them a crucial win in the series, puts them up 2-1, and really just set the tide, the turning point in the series to push the Dodgers and give them a little bit of momentum. The Dodgers had not played well in the entire postseason really up to this point, aside from, you could argue, the 4 games in the NLCS against a Brewers team that was just clearly overmatched. But they had not played well in the majority of the playoffs, and this continued into the World Series. The Blue Jays played a very good brand of baseball in the World Series, but it simply was not enough for the Dodgers to fall to them. The Blue Jays put up a really good fight here, especially in this Game 3 matchup, but the Dodgers' talent just ends up being too much in the long run for the Jays, and we saw that here in this 18-inning game. They simply just ran out of talent, and a guy who had been at the bottom of the barrel for the Dodgers, an afterthought for pretty much the entire season, especially when they picked him up, there was no thought that this guy could even come close to pitching for them in a World Series game. Yeah, he does, and they need him to, and he picks up some crucial innings for them and really solidifies the Dodgers' chances of winning the World Series. So now moving on to talking about this Game 7 matchup, which was, in my opinion, one of the greatest World Series games, just simply put, playoff games of all time in MLB history. You could compare it to some other World Series, such as the 2016 World Series, where the Indians faced off against the Cubs, and the Cubs ended up winning that one, which gave them their first World Series in over 100 years, which was a crazy World Series and one that people had been waiting on for a long time. But in this Game 7 matchup, the Dodgers took the Jays to 11 innings and ended up beating them 5-4 to host the World Series trophy. Bo Bichette hits a massive 3-run home run in the bottom of the third inning, which, in my opinion, I thought this would make the Dodgers start to crumble. Once the Dodgers get a little bit of a sense of pressure on them, that's when they can crumble. When you play their brand of baseball and they are able to have the lead and they're pitching well, things do not go well for you. But when you put the Dodgers on the ropes, sometimes they can tend to play a little bit of hero ball, try to hit the big home run, which they did not do in this one. They slowly chipped away at this 3-0 lead that Bo Bichette gave the Jays in the third inning. They took one run in the fourth, put up another one in the sixth, they put one up in the eighth, and of course one in the ninth that forced extra innings. And this, of course, the big hit of the game comes from an unlikely hero, once again, on the Dodgers lineup. Miguel Rojas, Miggy Rowe, comes up with 2 outs left on the season, and Miguel Rojas launches a solo blast that ties up the game. Coming up in this inning, it was assumed that, Miggy Rowe and the other guys in the lineup before him weren't going to be producing much, and it was just going to come up to the third batter in the order that was due to come up in Shohei Ohtani. Ohtani ended up flying out, and it proved to be Miggy Rowe's solo homer that really put this game in a position where the Dodgers could even be in it. And this was Miggy Rowe's second hit since October 1st, and he had only 2 home runs since the All-Star break, with just an insane stat. And like I said earlier, one of the most unlikely and insane moments in World Series history, which will make this one go down in the history books forever, which the MLB playoffs, what more can we say about them? They'd simply put the best playoffs, in my opinion, in all of North American sports. It has everything you want. It has drama, unlikely heroes, wild and insane comeback stories and knockoffs that we didn't think the Blue Jays would even be in the position to take a game from the Dodgers and take the series from them. I thought this would be a series that the Dodgers would take in 5, maybe 6 if the Jays were lucky, after we saw what they did to the Brewers in the NLCS. But the Jays really gave the Dodgers a fight, and this turned into a very insane series. The Blue Jays come up to the plate, bottom of the ninth, with a final chance in regulation to walk it off. Vladdy Jr. gives a ball a ride to the wall, but it comes up just short. Bo Bichette ends up singling, and the rally is about to start, right? And then he gets pulled again out of the game. John Schneider pulls Bo Bichette once again for IKF. And, of course, the only logical outcome would be for it to come back and haunt the Jays in this game. And it gives you the idea of what would have happened if Bichette stays in this one, because there's an opportunity later in the game where IKF comes up and he grounds out, I believe. And if Bo Bichette is up in that scenario, you have an increased likelihood, much higher likelihood of getting a hit, which could have ended up winning the Jays the series. But it goes into another inning, and then Will Smith hits a solo home run, and it's just pandemonium in Toronto. And Miguel Rojas, once again, comes up clutch for the Dodgers, this time in the field at second base with a diving stop with the infield in, and he bobbles the ball, fires home, has enough time to gun IKF at home. And again, this is a reason why putting IKF in the game was a risky play. He slides into home plate, feet up. Will Smith's spike comes off of home plate, and by IKF sliding in feet first, he takes just a tad bit longer to get into home plate, and Will Smith's spike is back down. If he slides in hands first, he's still likely out, but it increases the likelihood that he actually could get called safe, and this would have been an insane way for the World Series to end. In replay review, which honestly kind of in a way I'm glad the World Series like this one did not end on replay review, because what are they supposed to do? They just clear the benches and start celebrating? It would be a very unfulfilling way for such an insane series to end. But Dave Roberts replaces Tommy Edman in center field, and once again he puts in Andy Pages, and once again Dave Roberts pulls the right lever at the right time, and Pages comes in, there's a fly ball hit to deep left center field by, I want to say, Ernie Clement, and somehow Andy Pages mosses Kike Hernandez at the wall, who falls down, hits the wall, tumbles, and Andy Pages keeps the ball in his glove. And Tommy Edman is not a guy who's going to make this play. He's a smaller center fielder. He'd been dealing with some injury problems. The only reason why he was in the lineup was because Andy Pages was hitting sub 100 in the playoffs. So they really had to keep Tommy Edman in the lineup somewhere, and they ended up putting him in center field. The defensive replacement of Andy Pages comes in massive for the Dodgers. This was, again, a play that Tommy Edman was not going to make, but Dave Roberts pulls the right trigger at the right time, and his team somehow makes it to extra innings here. After playoff veteran Sir Anthony Dominguez works out of a bases-loaded jam in the 10th, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, the starter, comes in on 0 days rest, and he throws 96 pitches the day before, and he comes in and he throws 2 2/3 for the Dodgers. This is simply put insane out of a starting pitcher to come in on 0 days rest, yet let alone throwing 96 pitches. This is something that not a lot of American-born pitchers are used to doing, and it's more of a common culture in Japan for pitchers to throw well over 100 pitches, but still, I mean, being put into the Dodgers rotation where his workload was a little bit limited throughout the season compared to what he did in Japan, to put up 2 2/3 innings of 1 hit, on 0 days of rest is just one of the gutsiest performances we've seen in MLB history, without factoring into the equation that he was willing to relieve Will Klein in the 18-inning game if it had gone into extra inning, if it had gone into the 19th inning, which would have been the day after pitching a complete game for the Dodgers. So this deservedly wins him World Series MVP. Just simply put, the greatest pitching run in the World Series since Madison Bumgarner in 2015 when they faced off against the Kansas City Royals. But Will Smith, with a solo home run, gives the Dodgers the lead in the top of the 11th. The Jays try to rally in the bottom of the inning, but Alejandro Kirk hits into a double play and eliminates the efforts and their World Series aspirations. This is just one of the biggest heart rippers of all time in sports history, in my opinion. The Jays were up 3-2, were controlling most of the game in Game 7, and it gets ripped away from them, and the Dodgers once again hoist the World Series trophy for the second season in a row, one of the few teams to ever do that in MLB history. So this brings up the question, what are the implications this Dodgers World Series will have on the rest of the MLB in the future? Not often does a single World Series potentially have the potential to change the course of history, but the Dodgers truly do have the ability to do that. The Dodgers spent $1.2 billion on pitching alone in the Game 7 between Snell, Glasnow, Yamamoto, and Ohtani, and a record-breaking $450 million in total payroll this season. So, in my opinion, this is not the biggest problem with this is not an ownership group. They are pledging to drop gargantuan amounts of money on the roster and fixing holes. I commend that. This is what many owners around the league need to do. But the problem is that the deferments. it's the deferments that small market teams simply cannot make. The Dodgers have deferred over $1 billion, billion with a B, more than some countries produce in GDP, and they owe that to 9 players in future years, which is not currently impacting their payroll as greatly as some other teams across the league. So they do have this $450 million payroll, but they do owe over $1 billion in deferments, which allow them to still be aggressive in signing free agents despite the talent level that they currently have on their team. So despite not paying actively most of their stars worth the full contracts they signed, they still significantly have the highest payroll in the league, which kind of tells you everything that's wrong with the sport right now. The MLB CBA is ending in 2027, which is a bit of good news, but on the flip side, it will need to be renegotiated. Player salaries and payroll will be an extremely divisive issue during this time, and owners will once again cry poor and claim that player salaries have been too highly inflated to the point that only teams such as the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Mets, the Phillies can afford to sign them due to the money that they generate in comparison to other small market MLB teams. The owners will try to implicate a salary cap, which will limit the hard amount of money that teams can spend, which in my opinion is not the right way to go about this. And players will obviously not want to cap their earnings because then that means they will make less dollars total overall throughout their entire career. But they still want to increase the competitiveness of the league. So this is where they will push for a salary floor. So salary floor will just raise the bottom amount that a team will have to spend and establish a bottom amount. There already is technically a salary floor. It's just a level that a team needs to reach in payroll in order to receive revenue sharing from the league. So we last saw this last offseason with the A's, whose payroll was so low they had to go out and actually had to sign Luis Severino from the Mets in order to reach that salary floor that opted them into revenue sharing. So this one will be a floor for every team, no matter what their payroll is, that they will have to be at a minimum in order to raise the competitiveness around the league. That way there's not teams that are bottoming out their payroll and then gifting a free series win sweep to the Dodgers or a team like the Rockies, who they have a decently sized payroll, but they could still be doing more based off the amount of money that they generate from Coors Field, one of the highest attended stadiums in the entire MLB. They could raise the floor, and instead of being a 100-loss team every year, gifting the Dodgers wins and wins and wins, they could be a competitive team that might actually take a series from the Dodgers every once in a while, which would be a big increase and would severely limit the amount of games that the Dodgers would win, which would likely propel other teams to get into the playoff mix. The payroll gap between the largest and smallest payrolls this year, which were the Dodgers and the Marlins, was $347.6 million annually. So implementing a cap or floor is not a solution to the problem, in my opinion. A floor would be the most beneficial because it would increase competitive level across the league and spread out talent better, and a cap would primarily end up limiting the total amount of contract that rather than where the player would sign. So, for example, superstars would not be suddenly going to Milwaukee just because the salary cap gets put in. They would still ink massive deals to go to the Dodgers or these big market teams like the Yankees. They would just be getting less overall money per year, or AAV, than they would have been. So, example, instead of Ohtani signing for $700 million and $70 million a year, not including deferments, let's just say he gets paid $70 million this year, he would more likely be signing for $50 instead of $70 because of a cap. So these small market teams would still not really have a chance of signing these huge top tier players. They would still be going to the big market teams, just at a lower rate. Deferments must be outlawed to an extent is my real take on this. Deferments are a strategy that have been used for years by countless MLB teams to gain maximum payroll flexibility, either short or long term. But the Dodgers are simply using it differently than any team or franchise could ever have imagined. They are just simply using it as a means of loading up as much talent as possible. Then they're going to spread the $1 billion into the payroll of their franchise for the next 50 years, which is not the right way this should be distributed. Once the players retire, the $1 billion will just be deferred into eternity, and they will be paid long after they're retired. So my prediction actually is that the Dodgers ownership group will sell once it comes time to start making these payments to players like Snell, Ohtani, who have had hundreds of millions of dollars on their contracts deferred. I don't think they're going to want to pay this. I think they're going to sell off the team after they win who knows how many World Series, and the value of them will be so high that they will be sold for the most expensive sports team sale in North American sports history. And the billionaire that takes over the team is going to be in charge and responsible for paying the rest of these deferred contracts out. So my overall expectation for this is that there will be an MLB lockout in 2027. An MLB lockout is the worst case scenario for every team, franchise, player, fan, coach, everything, media, everything. The lockout is the worst possible scenario, but I truly do think that this is the most influential way that the Dodgers and this whole payroll problem can be solved. There has to be a lockout because they have to change something. Not having the sport over the summer will likely ruin the summer for millions of people across the world, including myself, but it might just be necessary in order to save the future of the sport. There will be a massive all-in push from the Dodgers this year, this offseason, as they know what's coming next. They brace for what will be happening in 2027, and they're probably going to be deferring as much money as possible to players maybe like Kyle Tucker. Maybe they go and steal Bo Bichette from the Blue Jays, which would be a real kick in the you-know-what, but they're going to defer as much money as possible before rules are established and they start their quest to be the next MLB team to three-peat, and the first one since the Yankees in 1998 and I believe to 2000. So there has to be a lockout. As I mentioned, it's going to stink, and there will be no baseball likely for maybe the entire summer. Hopefully, they end up getting some type of resolution worked out, whether it be a shortened season like 2020 or just a shortened season in general. Maybe they just start with 40 or 50 games instead of a full 162, kind of what they did in 2020. But it would truly be unfortunate to be without baseball, but I think it is necessary for something to really change in the course of MLB and to really allow some small market teams to just get in the mix. We've seen small market teams make the playoffs, and the last real small market team to win the World Series was the Royals in 2015. So that tells you now we're coming on a decade straight of just massive market teams winning the World Series. Let me know what you think in the comments below, or just tell me next time you see me in person, because I would love to hear your opinion on this. I know everybody has an opinion, everybody has a take, but that's my take. So thank you guys so much for listening. I appreciate it greatly, and I will see you guys in the next episode.